So we're in the middle of a series called Health and Growth, trying to identify some of the things that if we don't get these principles, if we don't get it in our soul, if we don't get it in our head, if we don't get it in our bodies, if we don't embody it, we don't have a chance to be a healthy part of Christ's body. If we don't have a chance to be a healthy part of Christ's body, we don't want to grow because we'll actually do damage to people that are here and we'll do damage to this community. So trying to figure out what does it mean to be a healthy community and to be able to then, because we're healthy, to be able to see that God is going to bless us with the kind of growth that He envisions for us, growth of life change, growth of marriages being put back together, growth of relationships getting healed, that kind of growth of new spiritual life, that kind of growth, that's essential. And so we're just trying to talk about, and we'll continue that through those not Vision Day, and those vision classes, about what are those pieces. And today we'd said we're going to talk about what's in 1 Corinthians 12, which says that there's many parts in Christ's body. But I want to talk a little bit more about the leadership side of Christ's body, because unless we get this, we'll never really know where we fit. And what I realized last service while we were singing that last song, that I've had one example that I really, really love about what leadership looks like. And it reminds me who our leader is. We have to be really, really clear about identifying our leader in the body of Christ. So I had a privilege while I was up in Canada to work with a worship pastor that he's unparalleled. He's the guy that introduced me to Riley and said, you ought to get acquainted with him. There's something going on in his soul where he could be an amazing leader of worship in a community. And he and I started a friendship, and at that point in time, this guy's name was John Buller. Down here in America, I think we have the Dove Awards for Christian music. In Canada, they had their equivalent awards, and this guy, John Buller, had won most of those awards up in Canada a number of times. And there was this one moment. It was a big stage, not just physically big, probably was that, but it was big in the sense of its scope. And it had a lot of artistry and people in the community. If you had talent and art, you wanted to be on stage with John Buller. And so it wasn't hard for him to attract really good talent. And he one time showed up one day and said, this girl, she was about 21 or 22, just ending her university career, said, she's got an amazing voice. And she did. Best voice I've ever heard in a church environment. And everyone used to tell her, American Idol was just kind of starting, and they had an equivalent in Canada Idol or something. And everyone kept telling her, you ought to do that because you'd win it hands down. I mean, she just had that amazing quality. And one day we were in this gathering, it was a large crowd, and we're worshiping, and I was somewhere back in the middle and just standing there, and John was just taking us somewhere. Like, he was doing his thing, he's jumping up and down, and he's all in with his spirit, and he's leading, and his band's rocking, and it's an amazing thing. And they set this whole thing up with a lot of energy, cut away. Maria sings this solo that was over the top. Like, it just took us somewhere amazing. And we all started clapping, and even an old guy like me started jumping, and we're just like going, this is crazy. And she gets done, the song ends, and we're all looking up and we're praising God. I mean, I knew what I was doing, and the people around me are all doing the same thing. Like, we're telling God, you are so amazing. And we're clapping and we're cheering and we're saying those things. And the clapping starts to die out, and it was a weird moment. Maria's still standing there. She's got the mic in her hand, and the lights are still kind of on her. And she looks out at everyone, and she says, thank you. Talk about a buzzkill. She didn't get it. Now, it was our early worship service that morning. We always did this ruthless talk to each other about what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to adjust. Being the old guy, they'd often look at me and say, oh, that illustration could have worked really well 20 years ago, but maybe you ought to update that story a bit. And we'd push into each other on the music and the drama, whatever was going on. And we're just, not because we're being critical, we wanted to be excellent. We wanted it to be the very best we could for the next worship service. So we were taking that feedback from each other. And I was there backstage when we were having that conversation. And Maria had stood here. We're all praising God. And she looks at everyone and says, thank you. Backstage, I'll never forget this moment. We're all just kind of in a small group, a little clustered up in a little group, a little clustered up. And John looks at Maria in that circle. And he just very quietly said, they weren't clapping for you. You misread that. They weren't clapping for you. Fast forward 2 days to Tuesday night, next Tuesday night. band did this full out, started early, ended late rehearsal in the evening. If you were going to be on that stage in that worship band, you had to be all in time commitment. You had to be all in, ready to go. They worked hard. They worked long hours as volunteers, and they loved doing it. I'm sure they had some community connection, but they were wanting to be the best they could be. There was a drive for that. And I remember that Tuesday night. Sunday morning, Maria had said thank you. John said they weren't clapping for you. Tuesday night, she is supposed to be there at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whenever they started. And the band was there. One other singer was there. John was there. There's about 7 of them all together. They're getting ready, and the time comes to start, and Maria's not there. And I could see John just kind of his body language. He's kind of trying, what do I do? And finally, I heard him say, okay, let's just go for it. And he starts rehearsing with the band. The other singer, gets in with her part. And after about 20 minutes, Maria shows up. She comes in the side door. It's up in Canada. It's wintertime. It's cold. She takes off her 3 layers of parkas, and she puts them on the seat. She gets up on the stage. She's kind of bouncy. I mean, she's really ready to go. She has that effervescent personality. And I'm sitting in the back. I've got a meeting that night. I've got my laptop. I'm just doing some work and just trying to soak up a little bit of what's happening. And I'm watching her come on stage, being really bouncy, really ready to go. Where's my mic? And I watched John walk over to her. And he says, where were you? And Maria goes, well, I was running late. I couldn't get here. And he looked around at all the other 7. He counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, counted himself 7. And he said, there's 7 of us here on time, ready to go. You're 20 minutes late. You've just wasted like I don't know what the math is, 2.5 hours of people hours. Maria, you're off the team. You don't get it. And I'm sitting in the back, and I'm going, this is the best talent I've ever heard. Like, he's going to kick her off the team because she's 20 minutes late, and she messed up on Sunday? Like, that's hard. And I was looking at that, and I was going, oh, man, John, what are you doing? Like, she's a star. Like, just look the other way this time. I can remember having, like, one side of me cheering, the other side going, oh, don't do this. And she looks at John for a second. She turns around, picks up her coat, and walks out. And I'm going, oh, man, we just lost the best vocalist we'll probably ever have in this church. I was going, John, what are you doing? I asked him afterwards, I said, John, what do you think? My voice probably cracked when I asked that too. And I said, just what do you think, John? Do you think you were too hard? And he goes, Gene, I'll never forget what he said. Gene, he said, what's our purpose for worship? What's the reason why we're here? He said, if we don't nip every time right at the start when someone shows any sign that the spotlight is meant to be on them, if we don't stop that right now, it'll get out of control and this will just become a show. So that if we don't do that, if we don't make sure everyone who stands on this stage knows that the leader, the reason why we're here is not us, not the glory of our church, not the glory of these musicians or whoever, if we don't get that, then we're just a good show, and you can find a good show anywhere. We've got to get this stopped right now. And, well, I got what he was doing, and I was still kind of wondering. I mean, I just had that, I don't know, Dennis, if you've ever been there, but you just go like, we got to make something happen, just every week trying to make it happen again. And I was just going, man, Maria can make some stuff happen for sure. But I knew he was right. I knew he was right. And about 6 weeks later, Maria came back, and she came back with humility, and she asked for an apology to the team. She asked for one with John. She apologized to me, and she stood on the stage, and she apologized to the whole church. She said, I didn't get it before. I thought, I love singing, and I got carried away. And she was just honest. She was raw. And so what did I learn about the many? There's a role for a Maria. There's a role for a John. There's a role for a pastor. There's a role for a small group leader. There's a role for a custodian. There's a role for a mission leader. There's a role for a nursery worker. There's a role for a youth worker. There's a role for a tech person. There's a role for an usher. There's a role for a friend. There's a role for a prayer. There's a role for someone to have gifts of generosity. There's many, many, many roles and many, many parts to play in our church. But what we first have to understand is that our many parts are simply here because we have a leader who has earned the right to be a leader. Every organization has to have a strong leader. Every organization probably has to have even a strong charismatic leader. I've got some great news for you guys. We have one. And he's here. And he's none of us. He's living God. He's Christ. It's a beautiful thing. There's a little clip I want to show you from one of my favorite all-time movies, Few Good Men, right? Everyone, somehow cheers for A Few Good Men. That's like a great movie, right? So there's this little moment right at the very end. I forget in the sequence if it's right before or right after that great speech where Jack Nicholson says, "You can't handle the truth," you know that part? But there's this moment where the leader gets identified. Now I want to use that to talk about our leader for a second. So Chris, could you show that real quick? Isn't that great? Every time I see that movie and I see that moment with that judge saying, "Witness will address the court as judge or your honor," and I'm quite certain I've earned it. Our leader has earned the right to be leader. Nelson Mandela, Chris, can you put up this Nelson Mandela quote? This last night came across this. I'm a little bit corny enough to really love inspirationalquotes.com, and this thing came up from Nelson Mandela, and he said, "Real leaders," here's how you know who a real leader is. It's not the person that likes the spotlight. It's not the person that likes the position. It's not the person that wants the position. Here's how you know who the real leader is. Real leader is the person that's ready to sacrifice their all for their people. When you find a leader like that, they've earned it. That's what Christ did for us, right? All these scriptures Paul talks about, he starts talking about leadership by talking about what Christ did. He said, Christ loved the church so much that he gave his life for us, sacrificed his all. He then says in Romans, while we were still sinners, not when we had merit, but when we were still sinners, when we had turned from God, God sent Christ, and Christ died for us who were sinners. He's ready to sacrifice his all for his people. He's earned the right to be our leader. So what's the leader want to do? Well, he wants to deploy us. He has a mission that takes many of us, all of us. And his goal was never to be the sort of faux leader that we sometimes talk about in church organizations. This leader that does everything, that everyone sits and watches. Actually, Jesus, who earned the right to be a great leader, the leader, supreme leader, he actually says, no, I'm going to send you. I'm deploying you. And he constantly, throughout his story in the Gospels, he's looking for Peter and John and Andrew and James and men and women like that. And it says over and over, he sent them out. And he says, I'm sending out these 12 and I'm sending out these 72. I'm sending you out. I'm deploying you. And why does he need to deploy us? How come he can't do it all himself? Or how come one great leader here in our group can't do it all himself? It's because of the scale. Remember, he says the scale, his scale, Jesus' scale, is huge. It's the entire universe. He says, I'm sending you out to preach the gospel in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And one person can't do that. 3 people can't do that. 8 people can't do that. It takes every one of us. But those old habits die so hard. Second, we start getting deployed. We find we have a gift to be a pastor. We have a gift to be a leader. We have a gift to be a prayer. We have a gift to have faith. We have a gift to be generous. those unhealthy, untransformed parts of us start to creep back in, and we start grabbing that spotlight and we say, no, look at me with my faith, and look at me with my praying, and look at me with my preaching, and look at me with my music. And all the time, like John said to Maria, you weren't given a gift for you. They weren't clapping for you, clapping for the one we're singing about, preaching about, praying to. So this morning, this mission that God's given us about transformation, it takes many. It takes many who get that we have a supreme leader. I want to challenge you to be part of the many. You got some empty seats around you. They won't fill up whether on Easter or Sundays after Easter by themselves. They'll fill up because you pray for someone with your gift of praying. They'll fill up with your gift of friendship because you befriend someone. They'll fill up because with your gift of hope, you can recognize someone who's lacking hope in their life, and you'll be able to say, well, I don't know if I know the full answer, but I know a person, Jesus Christ, and the Spirit of Christ is here, and you'll start finding some hope. Your mission part of the many, is to actually be a part of being willing to be deployed. I want to, it kills me what we've done with this in the church. We've got this mission to go into the whole world, got this mission to be deployed, got this mission to be willing to be used by God, to draw the spotlight back to God, take it off of ourselves and so on. And that happened a couple of thousand years ago. And 20 centuries later, about the most creative thing we can think of to do is to just put people in rows and seats and have them watch someone up on stage. And I'm just going, man, we've so missed this. There's a role for someone on stage. There's a role for a teacher. There's a role for a worship leader. There's a role for Dana to pray. There's a role for individuals to do their things. But there's many parts, praying parts and loving parts and teaching parts and so on. And, all these, Paul in 1 Corinthians uses the body with its ears and eyes and so on. And we've taken that knowing that all these parts are important. And we said, well, like the most important part is just the butt part because we need it to sit right here and to watch. And I'm just going, that was never what was intended. Never what was intended. We need all ears. We need all eyes. We need all mouths. We need all noses to report for duty. We need all hands to report for duty. We need all feet to report for duty. We need all prayers. We need all givers. This vision class, I'm so excited. We're going to have our first gifts class in a long time here in our church. You'll get a chance to really understand what part God's given you within the many. So hope you'll be a part of that. I want to do something. I know it's weird to end like this, but I'm going to end like this. You'll be happy I felt moved to go in a different direction this morning. Otherwise, I probably would have prepared this, and then it would have been just a mess. But remember the night of Jesus' crucifixion? He's attracted a small group, and he's having a meal with them, and he's preparing them for what's about ready to happen. And then he starts deploying them. And how does he do it? He washes their feet. He says, I'm going to send you out, and you're going to be servants. And I want to serve you right now, because you're going to do this the rest of your life. So, in the middle of my message first hour, I was going, man, I wish I had some water here so I could wash some people's feet. And it's probably a good thing I don't have the water, but I'm still going to do it at least with words. So I want to just call out a few people. As I've been speaking, I've been saying, God, tell me who to ask to stand. And it's not that they're any more important or any more important part or deserve more attention than anyone else, but just in my heart to call these names out. So when I call your name, would you please just stand and let me say just a bit. So Sue Nichols, would you stand just for a second? And reason I wanted, just as you were coming in for this service, and I was just seeing who was coming, I realized there are people here in this room this morning who are serving the cause of Christ, not necessarily in this building, but they're serving the cause of Christ in our community. And Sue has served for years in buildings like this and in communities like this. But right now she works with families with disabled children or disabilities at Beale Air Force Base. Did I get that right? And she is in a very emotionally taxing conversation all the time with families. And I just wanted to recognize that you are serving the mission of Christ in such an important and raw and vulnerable place. And I wanted you to feel like the best I could, your feet are washed without getting them wet today. Stay standing just for a second. Terrasses, would you guys stand? I don't know if you guys know, they are, they do serve actually here in this building as volunteers. They are here virtually every day doing some database work for us, getting our new database in place. And Rob does some research work for me on my messages, and he works for Noel with some ideas on food ministry and outreach ministries. They just have a serving heart. I don't know how to tell you anything more than that. They never, when they came here, they didn't say, well, could we have a place of leadership? They actually just said, where do you need someone to serve? And they have been serving like crazy. Ed, would you stand for a second? Actually, keep standing, just not for a second. So Ed serves here in our church. He's on our deacon board and meets with couples and families, men in our church who sometimes present themselves to us because they just have a genuine need. And he's one of the first persons we call and say, could you just come alongside these people? But it's not just here in this building where he serves. He is, maybe more than anyone I know or have known in a long time, if there's a need somewhere, you don't have to look very far before you find that Ed was there before I ever knew about it. You know, he serves at the Seventh-day Adventist. He serves with the Red Cross blood drives. If there's an emergency somewhere, you know, American Cross, the Red Cross, they send you places. He's just an amazing server here in our community. Birchfields, would you guys stand for a second? Not only does Bill have like the coolest haircut in the entire world, loving those 49ers. You don't love the 49ers, do you? Not really. His wife does, though. But Bill and his wife work with children in the court system who need someone to lean into their lives, to mentor them. And I don't know how many families you guys have touched here in this community, but lots of kids. I've heard the stories of kids that just had nowhere to go, and you're being part of that mission of love. It's just a crazy, great thing. Christine, would you stand for a second? So Christine is, I hear people that I listen to a lot, like Jill Mateer, tell me how grateful they are for what you do in supporting our women's ministries. And you guys, you and your husband have your hands full with children who have some pretty serious illnesses, and you still find the time and take the time to actually be involved in leading our women's ministries. I love that. Marianne, would you stand? Marianne is part of our outreach ministry. She's a volunteer. She spends her time as a volunteer here, but she leads our crisis response when people have a crisis. She's starting to work more with our food ministry and some of our other ministries that have mercy attached to them. And she's been a great resource for me to learn how to think about mercy. And I just love the fact that, sure, there are people in our church that benefit, but it's way beyond our church where people are benefiting because of what you do. And I could go on. I could name a lot of you and know that you're doing things that are really important, and you're part of that many crowd that are saying Jesus is leader, and you're willing to do it. But it was in my heart to just tell you this morning, you specifically, that Jesus is washing your feet, and he's recognizing what you're doing for others. And you're doing it because you get that he's the primary leader. You're not grabbing that spotlight and saying, put it back on me. You're a great example to me. You're a great example to this church. You're a great ally of living Christ. Thank you so much. So I'm going to end. Give you guys a chance to kind of just think about how you're going to respond. One way would be to actually think about coming to our vision class next week, 1:30. Love for you to spend a couple of hours. Jeannie's Cafe is going to be open all morning. Come get some coffee in the morning. Come get a bagel. Please get a donut. Please bring a donut up here. That would be great. And then you can get lunch right after the second service and come back at 1:30. We're going to have cupcakes galore for you for dessert, so it'll be a good time. We'd like you to be a part of that. Think about who you're going to invite to our Easter. And finally, in your heart of hearts, if you know that you've got a tendency to reach and grab that spotlight and pull it to you, and to say thank you like Maria did, when at the end of the day people weren't really saying anything about you, but because of what you did, they were trying to thank God. Can I pray for you right now? Because you need freedom from that. You need freedom from that evil thing that just binds you and restricts you. So just pray with me, and we'll use this as our closing. So God, here we are, sitting in chairs, but we're ready to get deployed, raising our hands and saying, God, send me, send us. You've given me a gift. You've saved me. You've rescued me. You've given me a gift to use. And I'm going to use it. But God, heal me right now from that old part of me that's either insecure and needs to be validated by what I do, or that part of me that reaches out to others in arrogance, demanding that they recognize who I am and what I do. God, would you free us from that grip? It's a way for your enemy to warp us, to warp your work, and we want to be free from it. We want to be as healthy as we can. We want to be emotionally free from all those things that cause us to trip up. And at the end of the day, God, we want to bring glory to you. We want to be able to have the courage in the middle of a moment to realize, they weren't clapping for us, and we're okay with that. And we want to just join the applause and tell God, you are so amazing. You're doing beautiful things. And we're so happy and honored to have a little part in it. In your name we pray today. We'll go in your grace. We'll go in your peace. Amen.